Good morning. We're continuing to talk about the meaning and significance of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We think this is the best way to celebrate the 8 weeks of Easter. Plus, the New Testament gives us so much detail and so much about the meaning and significance of those critical saving events through Jesus Christ. Today, I'm going to read a couple of verses out of Hebrews chapter 12, just the first 2 verses. There's no doubt whatsoever that in this passage, when the writer makes reference to what he calls the cloud of witnesses, he's referring back to that list of great heroes in the Christian faith from the Old Testament. They are described, their lives are talked about in Hebrews chapter 11. And so with that in mind, listen to Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The writer here is talking about perseverance. He's talking about endurance. Because God's people during the time of this writing were facing serious opposition in the Roman Empire and at least the beginnings of persecution just because they were Christians. And some of them were beginning to draw away and even considering or beginning to abandon their Christian faith. And so he's trying to encourage them to persevere in the faith, to endure. And we know a lot about endurance, our country, our culture. We've seen many examples of it in the last 15 months. We've learned something about this. And even though there have been struggles and difficulties, we've heard inspiring stories about someone who has worked hard or made it through or succeeded just because of grit and determination and faith. And so this letter is a lot about that. And so the opening word in our verses is the word therefore, which says, look back. What have we just talked about? What's the ground we've just covered? And how does that impact our understanding or our action now? And it refers back to those witnesses. And so it's describing those Old Testament heroes, those Old Testament saints, as witnesses of what God has done because they saw God do great things. And also they are witnesses to us about how God was faithful in their lives, how he kept them, how he was the basis and motivation for them to endure. So what do we do? That's the question in light of all this, in light of our trouble, in light of the inspiration of the saints before us. And so the writer says, well, lay aside anything that would hold you back. The analogy is one of a runner. It's a sports analogy. And runners particularly wear the kind of clothing that's not going to parachute on them. It's not going to catch a lot of wind. And they don't wear weighty things around their waist or on their back. They are free and loose and as lightweight as they can be so they can run the race as long as they can and as hard as they can. And so the writer says, well, do that in your life. Don't let anything that would weight you down, whether it's sin or some other kind of distraction, something that would turn you away, get rid of it and run this race lightweight. Of course, the Christian race, as you know, isn't a sprint. It's more like a marathon, and we're to run it all the way to the end. Now, back to the issue of motivation and inspiration. What do we have? What are the sources that might help us and encourage us? Well, again, I would just remind you of the witnesses who've gone before us. And the indication here is that they they're sort of sitting on the edge of their seats to see us and watch us finish our race as well. But in addition to them, and even better, the writer says, look to Jesus. So I would say, look at the witnesses, those who've gone before you, and to that list we might not only have Old Testament saints and New Testament saints, we might think of some of the Christians that we have known and loved, and they've been faithful to Christ, and they endured to the end. So we have the witnesses to inspire us, but even more so, the writer says, look to Jesus. And he says Jesus is the founder and the finisher of our faith. In other words, Jesus is the pioneer who's carved out the path, and Jesus is the finisher, the perfecter par excellence. If anybody ever finished the race that had been laid out before them, it was Jesus, and he did that with tremendous faithfulness and with tremendous endurance. So he's the founder of our faith, the finisher, and therefore Jesus is our very best example to endure and to persevere. Jesus went all the way, and he did the will of the Father, and he did that not only in faithfulness to the Father, but he did that for us, and so we're the benefit. So for endurance, for perseverance, I would say, consider Jesus who has gone before us. Often we talk about Jesus who is going with us right now, and that's a great truth. But here he has gone ahead of us, and he's carved out the path, and now we can follow him knowing not only that he's with us, but he's taken that path before us, and he has succeeded, and walking in his footsteps we can do. We can too. So I encourage you to endure. God bless you. Amen.